Hello and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about the most forgotten Samsung Z Flip phone. Now, I don't want to make this super long intro. I'm just going to go ahead and jump into it. I'm pretty sure my cat is in the room, so if you hear some background noise, I apologize for that. But let's just hop right into this, right? So first off, what exactly is this phone? Well, this is the Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 4. Now, my variant is 256 gigabytes, but we'll get into all this other stuff later. Came out in 2022. It's only 2 years old. I know a lot of people have this like stigma, I guess you could say, in their brain that like this is an old an old phone, but it's literally not. Just because it looks outdated, I guess you could say, even though it's a folding phone, how is that outdated? You know what I'm saying? I guess you could say it looks old. It definitely doesn't feel old. So let's talk about the hardware on this phone. Like for instance, the color options this phone came in. Now this phone came in a crazy amount of colors. And this phone was literally insane because you could you could switch out the color panels. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. So obviously you can see we have a top panel and a bottom panel, and on the Samsung Z Flip 5 and Z Flip 6 you only have the bottom panel because the top panel is literally all screen, and obviously on this one it is not all screen. So you could change the color variant. You could have blue and yellow, pink and red, well not red, pink and green, gray on gray, and obviously I have the basic black on black. You could pre-order and change the color versions on your phone. Now that is super epic. It's sad that it is no longer a thing, but it's also a good thing that it's no longer a thing since the newer models have that entire screen. Maybe one day the whole back of the phone will be screen. Well, that would be pretty stupid, so I don't know. But yeah, the colors on this phone, the most colorful Samsung phone ever, literally. You could have two colors on a phone. Like, make it make sense. That's insane. And I'm not saying make it make sense in like a bad way, obviously. It's super cool. Now let's talk about the hardware on this phone. I did jump into it a little bit with the colors, but let's fully dive into it, I guess you could say. So there is one issue with the hardware. The phone doesn't fold shut all the way. I mean, it does. It's obviously folded shut, but it doesn't fold flat is what I'm trying to say. And the first Samsung phone to fold flat is the Samsung Z Flip 5, which is a phone my friend has. And the reason I brought that up is because my friend always wanted the Z Flip lines, but he never really wanted to spend the money on it because they didn't fold flat and he thought they were kind of bad. And ever since the 5th generation, he's loved his, I guess, because he still has it. It folds flat, and on the Z Flip 4, which is obviously what this phone is, it does not fold flat. Now, I haven't come across any issues, like I haven't got anything caught in the display when it's folded, like in my pocket, but I do worry a little bit because obviously there's a gap. And this screen's a little fragile, not really. So I do worry a little bit. But let's jump back into the hardware again. Obviously, this phone feels very nice in the hands. Like, I literally love the design. Has your IME, whatever that number is at the bottom, which I don't even know what the hell that is. Your Samsung logo is on the hinge itself, which is cool to see. I'm not a fan of the glossy finish on the hinge because it's a fingerprint magnet, and I hate that stuff. But yeah. So on the bottom we have, I guess I should unfold it. So on the bottom we have one speaker USB-C and some microphones. Then on the left side we have a 5G band, obviously these lines, which they're probably meant for networks, and a SIM ejection card or a SIM card tray slot, whatever, which is good to see. Then on the top we have more microphones. Then on the right side we have a built-in power button with a fingerprint scanner. Power button with a fingerprint scanner is what I meant to say, and the volume rocker. Now let's look at this phone fold. Let me not make stupid noises. As you see, look at it. It's perfectly fine folding. Ooh, it feels so nice. So yeah, the design on this phone, the hardware, it holds up. Obviously, I guess you could say the outer screen doesn't really hold up because it's tiny, but I mean, that's, in my opinion, I think that's kind of subjective because not everyone wants the big outer screen. I mean, obviously you'd prefer it, but it's not like, the phone folds in half, bro. What do you expect? Another screen? You buying the phone because it folds in half? I don't know. But yeah, the hardware, in my opinion, holds up. For other people, they say they might disagree because of a small outer screen. But now let's jump into the battery on this phone. Battery life on this phone is amazing. At 60 hertz compared to 120 hertz, you will save a little bit of battery, probably around an hour to 2 hours of screen on time. Now, screen on time, I get around 6 hours on 120 hertz. Then on 60 hertz, it's probably like 7 hours. So you're not saving too much. But battery life, it doesn't disappoint. Other people in the comments might say theirs gets 2 days. No, it doesn't. You're not on it for 2 days straight. I know I say this every video because I get those comments on TikTok or whatever the hell I get them on. But yeah, that's the battery. Gets the job done. Now let's talk about the screen on this phone. 2 flaws with it, low key. But before we talk about the flaws, let's talk about the specs. This is a 1080p 120 hertz, 1200 peak nit brightness, around that, 1200, 1400, just around that. It ranges depending on the website you look at. So the screen, that alone, 120 hertz, super thin bezels and even bezels. Would you look at that? They're all even. They are a tiny bit on the chunky side, but at least they're even, and they do punch out of the screen. So the screen itself holds up, but let's talk about the two flaws with it. One, it is super narrow, and even the Z Flip 6 is still super narrow. So I think they're a little too narrow for my liking. But I mean, it's a very nice for reachability, but I'd still prefer a little bit wider because I prefer wider screens like a normal smartphone over just the reachability, which is the benefit of the smaller screen. So take that as you will. And the other flaw is it's a fingerprint magnet. Now that's because the screen is basically plastic. Look at that. Watch that. You see that? That is so annoying. Oh, that is bad. It's bad. I hate it. I hate that. So I usually end up having to wipe it at least a few times a day, probably around 3 times or something. So the screen, only issue is that it's a little too, it's a little too small. It's a little too thin for my liking, and it gets a fingerprint magnet. Now, the hinge or the crease in the middle is not an issue for me. It is significantly smaller than it is on the Z Flip 3. But it's not really an issue. And I did notice the Z Flip 6, the hinge or the crease in the middle is even smaller than it is on this phone. But the crease is not an issue for me. The only issue, the more important issue, I think at least, is that it's a grease magnet on the screen. That is so annoying. Now let's talk about the camera on this phone. A little disappointing, but it gets the job done. The camera's not bad on this phone. It's just like a flagship phone, and it's annoying that they only get like 2 basic cameras, ultra wide and a 12 megapixel main camera or whatever. So specs wise, they're basic. It's like a basic mid-range phone. It's just missing the zoom lens, which is the only issue. But the cameras, it gets the job done. I don't really want to get into it all. It gets the job done. If you're buying this phone and you're worried about the cameras, you shouldn't be. They'll get the job done. They're good cameras. They're like a solid overall, like high 8 to low 9s. I only say that because it doesn't have a zoom lens. Now let's talk about the processor on this phone. One of the good things about this phone is running the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, which is the first Snapdragon processor with the new name change. Because the year before, it was called the 888. And then they went crazy and started changing the names, and now they're called the 8 Gen 1, 8 Gen 2, 8 Gen 3, I think is the newest one. But this phone is running the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, and it definitely gets the job done. It's not laggy, it's not slow. This processor will hold you up for another 2-ish years probably. 3, you could say 3, but 2-ish years to play it safe. Let me show you what it scores on Geekbench 6. Now this is what it scores on Geekbench 6. Now this is really, really good. If we were to compare that to the newer Samsung A54, which I'm obviously holding, the A54 scores around 1,000, and the Samsung S24 Ultra scores around 2,200 on the top for single core. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but the processor on this phone, you should not worry about it. It'll get the job done between now and 2-ish years time. And that's like doing hard stuff. If you're doing basic scrolling on Instagram, then you probably got like 4 years with this processor. So I think that's it for the video. This phone definitely holds up. It is quite sad that it is a forgotten phone because the Z Flip 5 and the Z Flip, I mean, it's just older. That's why it's forgotten. But this phone brought a lot of cool stuff. Like, once again, the colors, significantly better battery life, the better screen, the better battery. I mean, I already said that. But this phone, it's a good phone. If you're thinking about buying it, for $200 or under, it's a steal. I got mine for $200. This phone does not disappoint. But if you're paying over $230, you're low key. I would try to get an S23, S24 FE, S23 FE, whatever, instead of this phone because of the newer processor. So yeah. Thank y'all for watching, and let me know, would you buy the Samsung Z Flip 4 in 2024? And should Samsung bring back this design for a budget folding phone? Wouldn't that be cool? Let me know in the comments what we thought of this video, and I appreciate y'all for watching.